Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Discovery and watched the stars through the main window. The ship moved quietly through space far from Earth. Jake had been exploring new worlds for 10 years, but today felt different. Something was wrong. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at her station working with the communication systems. She looked worried as strange signals came through the speakers. The sounds were not like anything humans had heard before. They were harsh and angry, like metal scraping against stone. "Captain Morrison, you need to hear this," Amy said. Her voice shook a little. She had been working all night to decode the alien message. The computer finally broke through their language barriers. Jake walked over to Amy's station. Dr. Paul Bennett joined them. Paul was the ship's expert on alien life forms. He had studied every known species in the galaxy. His face was pale as he listened to the decoded message. The alien voice spoke in perfect human language now. "The Xanthari Empire declares war on the human species. You have insulted our honor at Kepler Station. Your people will be destroyed. Within 90 standard days, no human will survive our wrath. We are the galaxy's most deadly warriors. Prepare for your end." Jake felt his stomach drop. Everyone on the bridge stopped what they were doing. Commander Lisa Taylor looked up from her tactical screen. Her job was to plan battles and protect the ship. She had never heard of the Xanthari before. "Who are the Xanthari?" Jake asked Paul. Paul's hands shook as he pulled up files on his computer. Pictures of alien creatures appeared on the main screen. They looked like giant insects with metal armor covering their bodies. Their eyes glowed red, and their claws could cut through steel. "They are the most feared species in the galaxy," Paul said. "Every race knows their name. They have never lost a war. In the past 100 years, they have destroyed 12 different civilizations. When the Xanthari attack, everyone dies." Amy continued working on the alien communications. More messages came through. She translated them quickly. The Xanthari were already moving their war fleets toward human space. They had thousands of ships ready for battle. "How many ships do we humans have?" Lisa asked. Paul checked the military database. "Earth defense has about 300 ships total. The Xanthari have over 10,000 battle cruisers. Their technology is much better than ours, too." Jake sat down in his captain's chair. This was the worst news possible. Humanity had just started exploring the galaxy. Most humans still lived on Earth or the nearby colonies. They were not ready for a war with advanced aliens. "What happened at Kepler Station?" Jake asked. Amy searched through recent reports. "A human diplomat named Captain Brown met with Xanthari representatives last week. Something went wrong during their meeting. The Xanthari felt insulted by human behavior. They declared us enemies of their empire." Lisa studied the tactical information about Xanthari weapons. Their ships could fire energy beams that destroyed anything they hit. They had shields that could stop human missiles. Worst of all, their void ships could become invisible and pass through solid objects. "We cannot fight them with normal tactics," Lisa said. "Their technology is too advanced. Our weapons cannot hurt their ships." Paul found more information about previous Xanthari wars. The results were always the same: complete destruction of the enemy species. No survivors were ever found after Xanthari attacks. They did not take prisoners or accept surrender. "Look at this," Paul said. He showed them records of the Kithra civilization. They had been peaceful traders with advanced science. The Xanthari destroyed their entire species in 3 months. Billions of aliens died. Their planets were left empty and dead. Jake thought about Earth. His home planet had 8 billion humans living normal lives. They did not know that war was coming. Children were going to school. Families were having dinner together. Scientists were making new discoveries. Artists were creating beautiful works. All of this would end when the Xanthari arrived. "Send a message to Earth Command immediately," Jake ordered Amy. "Tell them about the Xanthari declaration of war. Earth needs to prepare for invasion." Amy's fingers moved quickly over her controls. The message would take several hours to reach Earth because of the great distance. By then, the Xanthari fleets would be much closer to human territory. Lisa continued studying Xanthari battle tactics. They always attacked the same way. First, their scout ships would find the enemy's strongest defenses. Then the main fleet would arrive and destroy everything with overwhelming firepower. The battles usually lasted only a few days. Every species they fought tried to surrender, Lisa said. The Xanthari killed them anyway. They do not want prisoners or slaves. They want total extinction of their enemies. Paul discovered something interesting in the old records. The Xanthari follow strict military rules. They plan every battle perfectly. They never take risks or try new tactics. Everything is organized and logical. Jake began forming an idea. What if we do not fight them the way they expect? What if we use tactics they have never seen before? Lisa looked confused. But Captain, their technology is much better than ours. How can different tactics help when their weapons are so powerful? I do not know yet, Jake said. But we cannot win by fighting them the normal way. We need to do something they do not. Understand? Amy received confirmation that her message reached Earth Command. The response came back quickly. Admiral Steve Parker was calling an emergency meeting of all human military leaders. Earth's defenses were being prepared for war. The crew of the Discovery continued analyzing Xanthari communications. The alien messages revealed their complete confidence in victory. They spoke about humans as if they were insects to be stepped on. The Xanthari had never considered that humans might fight back in unexpected ways. Paul found records showing that every species the Xanthari conquered had tried to negotiate peace. When negotiation failed, they tried to fight with organized armies and advanced weapons. When their armies were defeated, they surrendered and begged for mercy. The Xanthari showed no mercy to anyone. No species has ever refused to give up. Paul said, when the Xanthari prove they are stronger, the enemy always surrenders. That is when the Xanthari kill everyone. Jake smiled for the first time since hearing the war declaration. Then the Xanthari have never fought humans before. We do not know how to give up. Admiral Steve Parker walked into the emergency meeting room at Earth Defense Command. The room was full of humanity's best military minds. Everyone looked worried and scared. News of the Xanthari war declaration had spread quickly through the human colonies. Colonel Karen Hughes sat at the long table studying battle reports. She was an expert in fighting enemies who were stronger than you. Her specialty was guerrilla warfare and surprise attacks. She had won many battles against impossible odds. General Tom Bradley entered the room last. He was old and had many scars from previous wars. Tom had survived the brutal fighting on Titan Colony when miners rebelled against Earth government. He knew how to fight when everything seemed hopeless. The situation is bad, Admiral Parker began. The Xanthari Empire has declared war on humanity. Intelligence reports show their invasion fleets are already moving toward our space. We have maybe 2 weeks before they reach our outer colonies. Karen looked at the tactical displays showing Xanthari ship movements. How many ships are we facing? Over 10,000 battle cruisers plus support vessels, Parker replied. Our entire defense fleet has 300 ships. Most of our vessels are exploration ships, not warships. Tom studied the intelligence reports about Xanthari technology. Their weapons could destroy human ships with single shots. Their armor could stop anything humans could fire at them. Their faster-than-light drives were twice as fast as human engines. This is not a fair fight, Tom said. We cannot win using normal military tactics. We need to think differently. While the military leaders planned on Earth, the first Xanthari attacks began. Mars Colony was mining asteroids in the outer system when alien ships appeared. The human miners had no weapons and no way to escape. Mike Thompson was an engineer working on Mining Station Alpha. He watched through the window as 3 Xanthari landing craft approached. The alien ships were huge and covered in weapons. Mike knew he and his crew were about to die. Everyone get to the maintenance tunnels, Mike shouted to his workers. Bring all the mining explosives you can carry. The miners were not soldiers, but they were tough people. They had spent years working. In dangerous conditions in space, Mike led them through the narrow tunnels that connected different parts of the mining station. When the Xanthari troops entered the station, they expected to find scared humans hiding in corners. Instead, they found empty corridors and silence. The aliens moved carefully through the station searching for prisoners. Mike and his team had planted mining charges throughout the station's support structure. The explosives were not military weapons, but they were powerful enough to crack asteroids. When the Xanthari troops reached the main mining bay, Mike triggered all the charges at once. The explosion destroyed 3 Xanthari landing craft and killed dozens of alien soldiers. The remaining Xanthari retreated in confusion. They had never encountered humans who would destroy their own station to fight back. News of Mike's success spread quickly through human communications networks. On Luna Research Station, Dr. Helen Foster was studying recordings of Xanthari communications. She was trying to understand how the aliens thought and made decisions. Helen discovered something important about Xanthari psychology. The aliens operated on pure logic and efficiency. Every decision they made was based on mathematical calculations of costs and benefits. They could not understand species that acted on emotion or instinct. The Xanthari expect their enemies to behave logically, Helen explained to her research team. When they show superior firepower, logical enemies surrender to avoid useless deaths. The Xanthari have never fought anyone who ignores logic. Meanwhile, on the frontier world of Novaterra, Marine Sergeant Nick Adams was leading a small patrol when Xanthari forces attacked. Nick's squad had 12 Marines armed with basic human weapons. The aliens had 50 soldiers with advanced energy weapons. The logical response would be to surrender or retreat. Nick's commanding officer ordered him to fall back to avoid unnecessary casualties. But Nick looked at his Marines and saw something different in their eyes. "We are not running," Nick told his squad. "These aliens think they can scare us into giving up. Let's show them what humans do when we get angry." Nick led his Marines in a direct charge against the Xanthari positions. It was tactically insane. 12 humans with rifles attacked 50 aliens with energy weapons across open ground. Every military textbook said the humans would be slaughtered, but the Xanthari had never seen anything like it. Their battle computers calculated that the humans should retreat or surrender. When the humans charged instead, the alien formation broke apart in confusion. Several Xanthari soldiers actually ran away from the attacking humans. Nick's squad reached the alien positions and engaged in close combat. Humans were smaller and weaker than Xanthari, but they fought with desperate fury. The aliens were not prepared for hand-to-hand fighting against enemies who refused to give up. The battle lasted only minutes, but the psychological impact was enormous. For the first time in their military history, Xanthari soldiers had retreated from an inferior enemy. Word of the human victory spread through both human and alien communication networks. On Earth, General Bradley received reports of these early battles. "Our people are fighting back," he told the military council. "They are not following proper military procedure, but they are winning small victories." Karen Hughes analyzed the battle reports carefully. "The humans are acting on instinct instead of training. They are making tactical decisions that no military academy would approve. But somehow it is working against the Xanthari." Dr. Foster continued studying Xanthari communications. The alien messages showed growing confusion and frustration. Their military commanders could not understand why humans were not behaving according to established patterns. "The Xanthari are having problems with their battle plans," Helen reported. "They planned this war based on how other species behaved. Humans are not following the script." Admiral Parker began to see a pattern in the human resistance. "Our people are not fighting like soldiers. They are fighting like angry civilians who refuse to be pushed around. The Xanthari do not know how to handle that." In space near Jupiter, Captain Danny Wright commanded a group of civilian cargo ships that had been converted into makeshift warships. The ships had no military armor or weapons, but they were fast and maneuverable. Danny received orders to avoid contact with Xanthari forces and protect civilian evacuations. Instead, he led his ships in hit-and-run attacks against alien supply convoys. The civilian vessels would appear suddenly, fire improvised weapons, and disappear before the Xanthari could respond. The attacks did little damage to the alien war machine, but they confused Xanthari strategists. Their computers could not predict when or where the human ships would strike next. The civilian crews did not follow military protocols or standard attack patterns. Tom Bradley watched intelligence reports flowing in from across human space. Small groups of humans were fighting back everywhere the Xanthari landed. Most of the human resistance came from civilians, not trained soldiers. The Xanthari expected to fight our military, Tom said. They did not plan for 8 billion angry humans who refused to accept defeat. Throughout the galaxy, other alien species watched the developing war with amazement. For over 200 years, the Xanthari had been unstoppable. Every species that faced them was completely destroyed within months, but humans were different. News reports showed human resistance growing stronger instead of weaker as the war continued. Children were making weapons in school workshops. Elderly people were volunteering for dangerous missions. Artists were creating propaganda that inspired others to fight. Karen Hughes realized that humanity's greatest strength was also their greatest weakness, according to military thinking. "We do not know when to quit," she told the council. "Every military manual says you should surrender when victory is impossible." Humans have never read those manuals. 2 months into the war, humanity began changing in ways that frightened even themselves. What the Xanthari saw as random chaos was actually rapid evolution of fighting methods. Humans were learning and adapting faster than any species the aliens had ever encountered. Captain Danny Wright stood on the bridge of his converted cargo ship, watching Xanthari battle cruisers patrol the shipping lanes. His fleet of civilian vessels had grown from 12 ships to over 200. Merchants, miners, and transport pilots had joined his irregular navy. The Xanthari expected human ships to attack in organized formations like proper military vessels. Instead, Danny's fleet struck from every direction at once. Cargo ships emerged from asteroid fields, passenger liners dove out of gas giant atmospheres, and mining vessels rose from planetary surfaces. "Target their sensor arrays first," Danny ordered his pilots. "Blind them before they can coordinate their response." The civilian ships carried weapons that no military engineer would approve. Mining lasers had been modified to cut through alien armor. Cargo containers were filled with explosives and launched like giant missiles. Passenger ships rammed Xanthari vessels at full speed. The attacks violated every rule of space combat, but they worked. Xanthari commanders could not predict what the human ships would do next because the humans themselves did not know. Each battle was improvised based on whatever resources were available on Earth. Dr. Lavra Mason worked in her laboratory surrounded by pieces of destroyed Xanthari equipment. Her team had been analyzing alien technology for weeks, trying to understand how their weapons and defenses functioned. "Their systems are incredibly advanced," Lavra explained to her assistants. "But they are also predictable. Every Xanthari device follows the same design principles based on mathematical efficiency." Laura's breakthrough came when she stopped trying to copy Xanthari technology and started using human creativity instead. She combined salvaged alien components with human engineering in ways that made no logical sense but somehow worked. Her first success was a proximity mine that activated based on Xanthari emotional emanations rather than movement sensors. The aliens radiated specific energy patterns when they felt confident or aggressive. Laura's minds exploded when they detected these emotional signatures. "The Xanthari cannot understand our weapons because we designed them using intuition instead of logic," Lavra told her team. "They calculate every possible threat based on rational design principles. Our irrational weapons do not appear in their threat assessments." Meanwhile, Xanthari warlord Zakvan studied battle reports in his command ship with growing frustration. His forces had expected to complete the conquest of humanity within the first month. Instead, human resistance was becoming stronger and more unpredictable. Zakvan had destroyed 12 civilizations using the same proven tactics. Scout ships would identify enemy strengths and weaknesses. The main fleet would then attack the strongest positions first to break enemy morale. Once the organized military was defeated, civilian populations would surrender immediately, but humans did not follow this pattern. When their military forces were defeated, civilian populations became more dangerous instead of surrendering. When their strongest positions were destroyed, they attacked from their weakest positions. When faced with superior firepower, they responded with tactics that bordered on insanity. The humans are not behaving logically, Zakhthan told his strategic council. Our battle computers cannot predict their actions because their actions make no mathematical sense. His subordinates had no answers. Every Xanthari officer had been trained to fight rational enemies who followed established military principles. Humans seemed to reject every known rule of warfare. Underground on occupied colony worlds, human resistance cells developed new forms of guerrilla warfare. Joe Barnes was a spacecraft mechanic who became a resistance leader when Xanthari forces occupied his home planet of New Detroit. Joe's background maintaining civilian ships gave him knowledge that formal military training never provided. He knew every weakness in human technology, which meant he could guess at weaknesses in alien technology too. Xanthari equipment is too perfect, Joe explained to his resistance cell. Their systems have no redundancy because they never expect anything to go wrong. If we can cause one small failure, their entire system shuts down. Joe's team began sabotaging Xanthari supply lines using methods that seemed almost childish. They put sand in fuel systems, programmed maintenance robots to perform their tasks incorrectly, and used computer viruses that made alien systems play human music instead of displaying tactical information. The sabotage caused minimal damage but maximum confusion. Xanthari logistics officers could not understand why their perfectly designed systems kept failing in random ways. Their diagnostic programs could not identify threats that were designed to be annoying rather than destructive. In the city of New Chicago, teacher Susan Clark organized civilian resistance using methods she had learned managing unruly students. She treated the Xanthari occupation like a classroom discipline problem that required creative solutions. Susan's resistance cell specialized in psychological warfare. They spread rumors that confused alien intelligence officers. They created fake radio broadcasts that gave Xanthari forces contradictory orders. They painted graffiti that made fun of alien commanders using jokes the Xanthari could not understand. The Xanthari take themselves very seriously, Susan told her followers. They cannot handle being laughed at. If we can make them look ridiculous, their authority starts to break down. Commander Beth Johnson faced the most direct challenge at Centauri Station, a strategic military outpost that controlled shipping routes between Earth and the outer colonies. Her defensive force included 200 human soldiers against 3,000 Xanthari troops. Beth realized that traditional defensive strategies would fail within hours. Instead, she turned the station itself into a weapon. Life support systems were modified to create environmental hazards that forced the Xanthari to fight in conditions they had never trained for. Artificial gravity was set to random fluctuations. That made it impossible to aim weapons accurately. Atmospheric composition was altered to create fog that blocked alien sensors but did not affect humans who knew the station layout. Temperature controls were used to create extreme heat and cold in different sections. We cannot outfight them, Beth told her soldiers. But we can make them fight our battle instead of theirs. They are used to sterile combat environments. Let's give them chaos instead. The Xanthari assault on Centauri Station turned into a nightmare for the alien forces. Every corridor presented new hazards. Floors would suddenly become walls when gravity shifted. Breathable air would be replaced by toxic gases. Emergency systems would activate randomly, creating noise and confusion. Beth's human defenders used their knowledge of the station's modified systems to move freely through the chaos. They appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking at confused Xanthari troops who could not adapt to the constantly changing environment throughout human space. Similar battles were being fought using tactics that no military academy had ever taught. Humans were treating warfare like an art form rather than a science. Every engagement was unique and unpredictable. Dr. Paul Bennett on the Discovery continued analyzing reports from across the war zone. Human casualty rates are remaining steady instead of increasing, he reported to Captain Morrison. This is unprecedented in Xanthari military history. Jake Morrison studied the tactical displays showing human resistance activities. Our people are not just surviving. They are learning faster than the Xanthari can adapt. We are becoming more dangerous the longer this war continues. The psychological impact on Xanthari forces was becoming obvious. Alien communications showed increasing requests for reinforcements and supplies. Veteran Xanthari officers were being replaced by fresh troops who had not yet been exposed to human tactics throughout the galaxy. Other conquered species began paying attention to the war between humans and Xanthari. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy's most feared warriors were showing signs of uncertainty and doubt, whispered conversations in Alien. Market spoke of humans who refused to die quietly. Resistance groups that had been dormant for decades began considering whether the time had come to challenge their Xanthari oppressors. 3 months into the war, humanity prepared for its most dangerous gamble yet. Admiral Chris Hamilton stood in the command center of Earth Defense looking at tactical displays that showed the impossible. Human forces were planning a direct assault on the Xanthari Forward Command Base in the Jupiter system. Operation Wildcard violated every principle of military strategy that humans had ever learned. The plan called for a mixed force of military vessels and civilian volunteers to attack the most heavily defended Xanthari position in human space. By all logical calculations, the operation should result in complete disaster. We have 500 ships ready for the assault, Admiral Hamilton reported to the Military Council. Half of them are converted civilian vessels with improvised weapons. The other half are our remaining military ships. General Tom Bradley studied the battle plans with growing amazement. This operation should be suicide. We are attacking a superior enemy in their strongest position with inferior numbers and equipment. Colonel Karen Hughes smiled as she reviewed the tactical details. That is exactly why it might work. The Xanthari expect us to avoid their strongest positions. They have never faced an enemy crazy enough to attack their command center directly. The human fleet assembled in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Captain Danny Wright commanded the civilian ship division while Admiral Hamilton led the military vessels. The mixed force looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen before. Cargo ships flew alongside military cruisers. Passenger liners carried weapons borrowed from mining ships. Transport vessels had been converted into mobile repair facilities. Even school ships from the outer colonies had volunteered to join the attack. Remember, we are not trying to fight a conventional battle, Admiral Hamilton broadcast to all ships. Our goal is to create so much chaos that the Xanthari cannot coordinate their response. Hit whatever targets you can find and keep moving. The assault began with the civilian vessels leading the attack. Mining ships emerged from the asteroid belt and began firing improvised weapons at Xanthari patrol craft. The aliens expected a few desperate humans trying to escape the system, not hundreds of ships attacking in formation. Captain Danny Wright led his cargo ship through the outer defenses while Xanthari fighters swarmed around him. His vessel had no military armor, but it was fast and agile. Danny used his knowledge of civilian ship handling to perform maneuvers that confused the alien pilots. Civilian ships do not fly like military vessels, Danny explained to his crew over the communication system. The aliens have studied human military tactics, but they do not understand how merchants and traders operate. The Xanthari defensive grid was designed to stop organized military assaults. When faced with hundreds of different ship types attacking from unpredictable angles, their automated systems could not prioritize targets effectively. Civilian vessels slipped through gaps that military planners never would have attempted. Pilot Maria Santos flew her damaged fighter toward the Xanthari command ship at the center of their formation. Her engines were failing and her weapons were empty, but she had one option left. Maria aimed her fighter directly at the alien vessel's communication array. "Tell them humans do not quit." Maria broadcast on all frequencies as her ship struck the Xanthari command center. The explosion destroyed the alien fleet's tactical coordination network. Suddenly, thousands of Xanthari ships lost contact with their commanders. Individual alien vessels began making independent decisions based on incomplete information, without central coordination. The Xanthari defense collapsed into confusion. Their ships fired on targets that other alien vessels were also attacking, wasting firepower on redundant strikes. Their formation integrity dissolved as different units pursued separate objectives. Admiral Hamilton led the military portion of the human fleet through the gaps created by the civilian assault. His ships concentrated their fire on Xanthari capital. Ships while the aliens were still trying to re-establish communication with their scattered forces. The battle lasted 18 hours and resulted in the first major Xanthari defeat in over 200 years. Human losses were heavy, but the psychological impact was enormous. News of the victory spread throughout human space and beyond. Xanthari. Warlord Zakthan received the battle reports in his flagship with disbelief. His forces had lost 40% of their ships in the Jupiter system. More importantly, they had lost their reputation for invincibility. "How did inferior human vessels defeat our command fleet?" Zakthan demanded from his subordinates. His tactical officers had no satisfactory answers. "The humans attacked with overwhelming numbers using unconventional tactics. Our defensive systems were not designed to handle their chaotic assault patterns." Throughout the Xanthari Empire, other military commanders began questioning their previous assumptions about human capabilities. Reports from the front lines describe human forces that seemed to grow stronger and more dangerous with each battle. Meanwhile, Captain Alex Turner led the human counteroffensive that pushed deep into Xanthari territory. His mixed force of regular, military and civilian volunteers had developed new fighting styles that combined human unpredictability with increasing knowledge of alien weaknesses. Alex's fleet included scientists like Dr. Gary Stevens, who had been studying Xanthari psychology throughout the war. Gary's research revealed a critical flaw in alien military thinking that humans could exploit. The Xanthari based their entire strategy on the assumption that defeated enemies will accept logical surrender, Gary explained to the fleet commanders. They have no protocols for dealing with enemies who refuse to acknowledge defeat. This psychological weakness became the foundation for human offensive operations. Instead of trying to defeat Xanthari forces completely, human attacks focused on creating situations where logical surrender was impossible. Human ships would attack and then retreat when faced with superior firepower, only to return from different directions minutes later. Ground forces would abandon defended positions and then reoccupy them after the aliens moved on. Civilian populations would appear to surrender and then resume resistance activities immediately. The constant cycle of attack, retreat, and renewed attack created psychological stress that Xanthari commanders had never experienced. Their military doctrine assumed that enemies would either fight until destroyed or surrender permanently. Humans did neither. On the occupied world of New Titan, Resistance leader Joe Barnes coordinated with Captain Turner's fleet to launch simultaneous attacks on Xanthari positions. The combination of orbital bombardment and guerrilla warfare created chaos that the alien forces could not counter. "We hit them from space and from underground at the same time," Joe reported to Turner. "They cannot defend against attacks that come from every direction simultaneously." The success of human offensive operations inspired resistance movements throughout the Xanthari Empire. Species that had been conquered decades earlier began sabotaging alien facilities and attacking occupation forces on the industrial world of Vega Prime. Enslaved aliens who had been building Xanthari warships suddenly turned their construction tools into weapons. The uprising was suppressed within days, but it demonstrated that human defiance was spreading beyond humanity itself. Xanthari High Command faced a crisis unlike anything in their military history. Their perfect conquest record was broken. Their military doctrine was failing against an enemy that refused to follow established patterns. Most dangerous of all, Their authority over conquered species was beginning to crumble. Emergency councils were called throughout the Xanthari Empire to address the human problem. Military leaders who had never experienced defeat struggled to understand how an inferior species could challenge their supremacy. "The humans are not fighting a war," observed one Xanthari strategist. "They are conducting an extended temper tantrum that happens to involve military weapons." But Admiral Hamilton understood something that the Xanthari could not grasp. "We are not throwing a tantrum," he told his staff officers. "We are showing the galaxy that the undefeatable can be defeated. That changes everything." Throughout human space, civilian populations celebrated their military victories with festivals and parades. Children drew pictures of human ships defeating alien monsters. Musicians composed songs about brave pilots who refused to surrender. The cultural response to military success created a feedback effect that made human resistance even stronger. Every victory inspired new volunteers to join the fighting. Every sacrifice became a story that motivated others to take greater risks. Dr. Helen Foster continued analyzing Xanthari communications and discovered that alien morale was beginning to crack. Military reports contained references to irrational human behavior and requests for psychological counseling for traumatized Xanthari soldiers. "They are starting to fear us," Helen reported to Earth Command. For the first time in their history, Xanthari warriors are experiencing doubt about their ability to win battles. The final phase of the war began when humanity did something that no species in galactic history had ever attempted. They launched a direct assault on the Xanthari homeworld itself. The decision defied every principle of military strategy and common sense that had guided warfare for thousands of years. Admiral Chris Hamilton stood in the command center of the massive human fleet assembled at the edge of Xanthari space. Over 2,000 ships from across human territory had gathered for the impossible mission. Military vessels flew alongside civilian craft that had been converted into improvised warships. "The plan is simple," Hamilton addressed the fleet commanders. "We are going to attack the most heavily defended world in the galaxy using tactics so unconventional that their defense systems cannot adapt. We are not trying to conquer their planet. We are trying to break their will to fight." General Tom Bradley had joined the fleet aboard his command ship. The old soldier looked at the tactical displays showing Xanthari homeworld defenses and shook his head in amazement. "I have fought in dozens of wars, but I have never seen anything like this. We are about to attack a planet protected by 10,000 orbital platforms and 50,000 defensive ships." Colonel Corinne Hughes smiled as she reviewed the assault. "Plans. That is exactly why this might work. The Xanthari have spent centuries building defenses against logical military attacks. They never considered defending against opponents who ignore military logic entirely." The human fleet included every type of vessel that humanity had ever built. Cargo ships carried weapons designed by school children. Passenger liners had been converted into mobile hospitals. Research vessels contained scientists who planned to conduct experiments during the battle. Captain Jake Morrison commanded a squadron of exploration ships that had been modified with mining equipment. His vessels would use industrial tools as weapons while performing maneuvers that no military pilot would ever attempt. "Remember, we are not fighting a traditional space battle," Morrison broadcast to his squadron. "Our job is to create so much chaos that the Xanthari cannot tell what we are trying to accomplish." The assault began with the most unconventional opening move in military history. Instead of attacking the strongest Xanthari defenses, human forces targeted the weakest positions first. Civilian ships loaded with improvised weapons struck mining facilities, communication relays, and supply depots. The Xanthari defensive fleet responded exactly as their training dictated. They concentrated their forces to protect the most important military targets while ignoring attacks on civilian infrastructure. This was the logical response to a normal invasion, but humans were not conducting a normal invasion. While Xanthari warships guarded their military bases, human civilian vessels were systematically destroying every non-military target they could find. Shopping centers, entertainment facilities, and residential areas came under attack from weapons that ranged From mining lasers to improvised explosives, Lieutenant Colonel Sam Mitchell led the ground assault that broke every rule of planetary invasion. Instead of securing strategic positions like spaceports and communication centers, human forces spread chaos throughout Xanthari population centers. Sam's troops included regular soldiers, civilian volunteers, and specialists from dozens of different professions. Engineers sabotaged infrastructure systems. Teachers organized psychological warfare campaigns. Artists created propaganda that confused alien authorities. "We are not trying to occupy their planet," Sam explained to his officers. "We are trying to make their highly organized society collapse under the weight of random chaos." The Xanthari homeworld had never experienced warfare before. For over 1,000 years, their military had fought all battles on other worlds, while their civilian population lived in perfect safety and order. The sudden appearance of human raiders created panic that their social systems could not handle. Xanthari civilians had been taught that their military was invincible, and their homeworld was completely secure. When human forces began attacking civilian targets, the entire foundation of their society started to crumble. Emergency services, designed to handle natural disasters, could not cope with deliberate attacks that seemed to follow no logical pattern. Communication networks became overloaded as terrified civilians tried to contact authorities who had no answers to give them. Dr. Gary Stevens accompanied the invasion force to study Xanthari reactions to human tactics. His research had revealed that the aliens operated on rigid social hierarchies that depended on predictable authority structures. Their entire civilization is based on the assumption that superior force equals legitimate authority, Gary reported to the military commanders. When humans demonstrate that their military can be defeated, their government loses the ability to maintain social order. The psychological impact proved as devastating as the military assault. Xanthari civilians who had never questioned their government's authority began demanding explanations for how inferior humans could attack their supposedly invincible homeworld. Warlord Zakthan found himself facing rebellion within his own command structure. Subordinate officers who had followed his orders without question for decades began suggesting that perhaps negotiations with humans might be necessary. "The humans are not fighting to win territory or resources," one of his advisors reported. "They seem to be fighting for the simple pleasure of proving that we can be defeated." This realization horrified the Xanthari leadership more than any military defeat could have. Their empire was built on the belief that they were naturally superior to all other species. If humans could challenge that superiority, then their entire worldview was wrong. The final confrontation came when Captain Jake Morrison found himself face to face with Warlord Zakthan in the ruins of a Xanthari government building. The alien warrior was larger and stronger than any human, armed with advanced weapons and protected by sophisticated armor. By all logical measures, Morrison should have been killed instantly. Instead, he did something that no rational opponent would ever attempt. He challenged the Xanthari warlord to single combat using primitive human weapons. "Your people think they are better than humans because they have superior technology," Morrison told Zakthan. "Let's see how superior you are when we fight with equal weapons." The challenge made no tactical sense. Morrison was risking his life, and potentially the entire human war effort, on a personal duel that could not change the strategic situation. But the psychological impact was enormous. Zakthan had spent his entire life believing that Xanthari were naturally superior warriors. If he refused to fight a human in equal combat, he would be admitting that his superiority depended on better equipment rather than natural ability. The duel lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours to everyone watching. Morrison fought with desperate fury while Zakthan relied on superior size and strength. The alien warrior had better training and more experience, but he had never faced an opponent who refused to acknowledge when he was beaten. When Morrison finally defeated the Xanthari warlord, the symbolic impact was greater than any military victory. The galaxy's most feared warrior had been beaten by a human explorer using primitive weapons and sheer determination. News of Morrison's victory spread throughout the Xanthari Empire within hours. Conquered species that had been oppressed for generations realized that their oppressors could be defeated by opponents who were willing to fight without fear of death. Rebellions erupted on dozens of worlds as enslaved populations rose against their Xanthari overlords. The alien military found itself fighting simultaneous uprisings across their entire empire while still trying to resist the human invasion of their homeworld. The Xanthari Empire surrendered unconditionally within days of Morrison's duel with Zakfin. For the first time in their history, they admitted complete defeat and begged for terms from their enemies. Admiral Hamilton accepted the surrender aboard his flagship while representatives from dozens of liberated species watched the ceremony. The galaxy's most feared warriors formally acknowledged that they had been defeated by humans, who were too stubborn to accept that some fights could not be won. Dr. Paul Bennett compiled the final report on the war for Earth Command. His analysis would be studied by military historians for generations to come. Humanity's greatest weapon was never their technology or their tactics, Bennett wrote. It was their absolute refusal to accept that some enemies cannot be defeated. When faced with superior force, humans do not calculate odds or consider consequences. They simply fight harder. The psychological impact of human victory spread throughout the galaxy like a shockwave. Species that had lived under oppression for centuries learned that the strong could be defeated by the determined. The balance of power that had existed for millennia began to shift as new voices demanded freedom and justice. Captain Morrison returned to Earth as the most famous human in the galaxy. His defeat of warlord Zakfin had become legend among both human and alien populations. Children across dozens of worlds heard stories about the human captain who refused to surrender even when victory seemed impossible. But Morrison understood that the real victory belonged to every human who had chosen to fight rather than submit. From Mike Thompson's miners who destroyed their own station to Maria Santos who crashed her fighter into an alien,